Welcome to Campus Education Week. My name is John, by the way, and I will be addressing the topic especially for young single adults: who, when, and why we marry. A number of years ago, someone called me from the New Era magazine and asked if I would be willing to submit an article for possible publication. The entire issue was to be devoted to the topic of friendship. I was flattered that they would call, and I asked them what particular subject they wanted me to write about. And when they told me, I wondered why they thought I was the best choice to write the article. The topic was, why don't I have any friends? Brother, by the way, you were the first one that came to our minds. So if you open up your June 1998 New Era, you'll find an article entitled, "I Have No Friends" by John By the Way. While working on the article, I was reminded of something that happened to me following a youth conference I attended. A young man with tears in his eyes came up to me and asked, "How can I make people like me?" I thought about it for a while, and I finally said, well, I don't think you can make people like you, but perhaps you can make yourself more likable. Perhaps you can't change other people's hearts and minds, but you can always change you. Sometimes as teenagers and sometimes as young adults, we focus on things that we cannot control. Some of us obsess about sports to the point that our entire mood is based on the win-loss record of our favorite team. For example, I know people that had sleepless nights because their favorite NBA team lost in the finals. I mean, I wanted the Jazz to win too, but I had to keep telling myself, John, you can't attach your feelings to things you can't control. And I also wondered if Karl Malone ever paced the floor and worried whether I would do a good job at a fireside. Probably not. One of the things most young single adults think about and sometimes worry about is dating and marriage. Many young adults find someone to marry rather quickly and easily without too many problems, but others find the process of courtship, dating, courtship, and marriage much more difficult. It is to this group, the group for whom marriage has not just fallen into place, that I would like to speak. Imagine yourself sitting at the keys of a magnificent grand piano. The lights in the room reflect brightly on the highly polished surface of the ebony-stained wood. You're comfortably situated in a large banquet room filled with people. The music before you is clearly labeled Matrimony, a duet. Throughout the evening, dinner guests approach the piano and with a puzzled look say, "Hey, why don't you play that music?" "I'd like to," you respond, "but it's a duet. I need somebody to sit here and play it with me." "Well, you're not trying hard enough," they mutter as they wander off. You wonder to yourself if you could possibly play all the notes the music requires with only 10 fingers. A moment later, someone else notices you sitting all alone and says, "Hey, how come you're not playing that piece?" You can't understand why they haven't noticed that the music clearly calls for another pianist, but you politely answer, "Well, I'd like to play this song. I really would, but someone has to choose to sit beside me and play it with me. I can't play it alone." "Oh, well, you could play it if you had more faith," they remark as they walk away. More faith, you wonder? Could having more faith give me 2 more hands? You're no longer surprised when a third observer walks up and asks, "Aren't you going to play that piece?" "Well, I'd really like to," you respond, "and I know I should. And I'm sure the music is beautiful, but someone else who has agency like I do has to voluntarily sit beside me and play." "Well, I think you're just being too picky," they advise as they leave. For many of the things we desire in life, we just decide what we want, we set our mind to it, we work hard, and we can get it. But marriage is different. Somebody else is involved, and that changes everything. It's very much like trying to play a duet with only 2 hands. In short, marriage is perhaps the only commandment you cannot obey by yourself. You can obey the law of tithing by yourself. You can keep the Sabbath day holy by yourself. You can keep all of the other thou shalt nots, but you can't keep the commandment to get married by yourself. Actually, there is another commandment that requires another person: multiply and replenish the earth, but it's important to obey the get married commandment before you proceed to this one. When it comes to matrimony, someone else has to voluntarily join you, and having more faith, trying harder, and being less choosy cannot affect someone else's agency. An all-out war was initiated when Satan sought to destroy the agency of man, and the freedom to choose is just as important and inviolate today. He cannot make someone fall in love with you, and God will not violate agency, and that's what makes this commandment to get married so interesting. It's different than any other I can think of. So don't get too discouraged as you seek for a piano-playing partner, and just remember, as these well-meaning guests approach your piano, as they inevitably will, keep your sense of humor, because the fact is these people never go away. They just change their questions. As soon as you are married, one of them will approach you and say, "So, when are you going to have a trio?" So worrying about things we cannot control is a perfect recipe for misery. So do the best you can. But don't be too obsessed with the fact that you're single. Some people can't get their minds off it. They think about it, they talk about it, and they seem to steer every conversation in that direction. Doesn't matter what you say, they'll make a comment about it. For example, So I hear the zoo's expanding. Yeah, and I'm still single. Or, hey, they're closing the freeway tonight. Yeah, I know, and I'm not married. And here's the problem with that. It's not attractive. In fact, it's unattractive. Nobody wants to hang out with someone who can't get their minds off their challenges and their problems, especially problems over which they do not have full control. On the other hand, there's some people that are always excited. They always have some new adventure or some new project planned. They seem to just love life, and they don't obsess over what they can't control. Instead, they tackle what they can control, and they live life at the top of their lungs. And you know what? These people are attractive. They're fun to be around. Their confidence and enthusiasm for life is contagious. And because of their constant efforts to improve themselves and make a difference in the lives of others, they become better, more interesting, and even more attractive with time. Meanwhile, those who only focus on what they can't control just get older. A few years ago, my wife and I visited Liberty Jail. Not as inmates, but as tourists. And I was surprised at how small the room for the prisoners was, and I was sobered when I thought of the prophet Joseph Smith and other men whom we respect and admire, having to spend the winter of 1839 in such a cold, dark, and damp place. And at one point I asked one of the sister missionaries, where was the restroom? She replied, oh, well, the jailers would lower a bucket from the ceiling. I was even more sobered as I thought of these men living in such cramped quarters with no privacy and little dignity. And since that visit to Liberty Jail, I have never been able to read sections 121, 122, and 123 of the Doctrine and Covenants in the same way. They all came from that setting. I'm grateful because of the words of section 123. Because of that, they are even more powerful to me now. This is 123, verse 17. Therefore, dearly beloved brethren, let us cheerfully do all things that lie in our power. And then may we stand still with the utmost assurance to see the salvation of God and for his arm to be revealed. Now notice that Joseph didn't say, let us do all things that lie in our power, but let us cheerfully do all things that lie in our power. Even from those circumstances, Joseph admonished the saints to be of good cheer. Also, notice that Joseph seemed to say, do what you can do. Part of the message of that verse, I believe, is don't focus on things that you can't control. Do what you can do and trust the Lord to take care of the rest. As for dating, I used to joke with my other single friends that I usually felt happier, more energetic, and more in love with life when I wasn't dating anyone than when I was. And that seemed wrong to me. Isn't dating supposed to be fun? What was the difference? Well, when I was dating, I would make some mistakes. Sometimes I made what the other person thought of me so important that I attached all my moods to it. Have you ever done that before? If that someone special calls or drops by or gives you a note, you're on cloud nine, you smile, you crank the loud music as you drive around, and you have a great day. But if they don't say hello, if they don't smile at you just the way you expect, you mope and wonder and worry, lose your appetite, turn off the radio, and imagine a multitude of worst-case scenarios about what might happen or what might have happened. And we focus on what we can't control. This is dangerous because whenever we use another person's reactions toward us as the sole measuring stick for our own self-worth, we climb aboard a roller coaster with an endless track of ups and downs. So what do? We try, and I emphasize try because all of this is easier said than done, to focus on doing what we can do and exercise faith in the Lord about the rest. Next, I want to talk about looking for blind spots. Have you ever tried to change lanes on the highway and been startled by another vehicle's horn? So you swerve quickly back into your own lane, wondering if you're about to become the latest victim of road rage? I've done that. Even with a rear view mirror and fender mirrors, there are certain places you just can't see from the driver's seat. And they call those things blind spots. Sometimes we do things in our lives which prevent us from achieving the things we want, and we may not even know it. They might be personal habits, quirks, or misperceptions. I've heard those kinds of things called personal blind spots. One time, after being lined up by my roommate for a triple date, one of my blind spots was revealed to me. The day after our date, the girl that I took out told my roommate that I played the car stereo so loud that when she got home, she had a headache. She also felt like I wasn't very interested in her because while the six of us were playing a board game, I started thumbing through a magazine. He also told me that she didn't think I was a very good listener. Me? Not a good listener? Finally, I looked at him and said, oh, I'm sorry, were you talking to me? Joking aside, I was devastated. I never knew I did all that kind of stuff. What kind of jerk would do all that? Me. It's a good thing that he had the courage to tell me about those things because I was blind to it. I wouldn't have discovered it on my own. So the next time I was on a date, I muted my 25-watt, 300-amp, 14-inch subwoofers, put away Popular Mechanics, and tried to keep my mouth shut and my eyes and ears open. I'm grateful to those who love me enough to tell me about my blind spots. It wasn't a pleasant experience, but once you've had your blind spots pointed out, you can do something about them. Suddenly, your blind spots become something you can see and do something about. And sometimes it's just a matter of being a little more observant about yourself and others. President Spencer W. Kimball counseled, "You might take a careful inventory of your habits, your speech, your appearance, your weight, and your eccentricities. Take each item and analyze it. What do you like in others? What personality traits please you in others? Are your dresses too short, too long, too revealing, too old-fashioned? Does your weight drive off possible suitors? Do you laugh raucously?" It's my favorite. Ha ha ha. I don't know what that means. Are you too selfish? Are you interested only in your own interests, or do you project yourselves into the lives of others? What do you do to make yourself desirable? Do you overdo or underdo? Too much makeup or too little? Scrupulously clean, both physically and morally? What are your eccentricities, if any? I think nearly all people have some. If so, then go to work. Classify them, weigh them, corral them, and eliminate them one at a time. That's the end of the quote from President Hinckley. We all have good leaders and teachers that we love and trust, and sometime, if you think you might have some blind spots, you might want to get your courage up and ask one of them for help. You might say, "If you ever notice that I'm doing something that's making it harder for me to succeed, would you tell me about it, please?" Again, it's easier said than done, and humble pie is sometimes harder to swallow than a sack of doorknobs, but I'm a better person today because I did it, and someone loved me enough to point out some of the things that I couldn't see. Let's talk about who we marry. Of course, we marry our fiancés, but some of you are still looking for yours. Elder Bruce C. Hafen, speaking to students at what was formerly called Ricks College, said, quote, "Don't date someone you already know you would not ever want to marry. If you fall in love with someone you should not marry, you can't expect the Lord to guide you away from that person after you are already emotionally committed." That's the end of the quote. Why shouldn't you date someone you know you shouldn't marry? Well, for one thing, it's a waste of time for both of you because it takes both of you away from more promising relationships. And secondly, you could hurt someone's feelings. But there's a third thing in there that's very important. Look at the quote again. If you fall in love with someone you should not marry. Did you catch that? You mean it's possible to fall in love with someone you shouldn't marry? Absolutely. So you'd better be careful who you date because you marry who you date. Falling in love is a difficult experience to define, and most of what we understand about falling in love comes from TV shows and songs on the radio. Now there's a fine source for how to govern your life. You meet somebody, and if you suddenly hear music, then you know you're falling in love. And here's another frightening fallacy from Hollywood. The feeling of falling in love is a sign. It's fate. It's Cupid. It's the cosmos telling you you've met the right person. And this is especially true if they're good special effects. Not so, says Elder Hafen. You can fall in love with someone you should not marry. Now, of course, this isn't to say you shouldn't give a friendship a fair chance. It may take a few dates to find out if the relationship has potential or not, but the point is, if you're sure it's not going anywhere, the kindest alternative is to discontinue the dating relationship. Brother M. Gawain Wells spoke of this issue in a superb article in the June 1982 Ensign called Breaking Up Without Going to Pieces. He said, quote, "It feels good to invest in a relationship, to care, to want to share, to want to give. If your dating relationship feels joyous and healthy, if both of you feel the Lord's approval of your decision to marry, then the relationship works and you marry. If it doesn't work, you don't marry. There is no third alternative. However, many people assume there is a third alternative and try to keep the relationship alive when all signs of vitality have ceased. Both in my church callings and in my profession as a clinical psychologist, I have worked with people who cannot accept breaking up as a healthy part of the selection process of courtship. Instead, they see it as a time to punish themselves, to feel hurt, or even to try and hurt others. Sometimes it's better for two people not to marry each other. They would both be happier married to other people. It's that simple. Perhaps they formed a relationship for the wrong reasons, but even when the motives are right, the relationship still might not have that spark that impels both toward marriage. In such cases, breaking up is often the kindest alternative." That's the end of the quote from Brother Wells. For many of us, the dating cycle is like a broken washing machine. It goes through the pre-soak, the wash, the soak, maybe a little break to add fabric softener, but somehow never gets to the rinse and spin. Oh well, it's all part of the process, and sometimes it's not very fun because what do you do with an armful of soapy clothes? How do you know when you ought to break up? Here are a few of the danger signs from Brother Gawain Wells' article and a few of my own that help us to know a relationship is in trouble. You begin to feel obligated. Things you should freely want to do for the other person become tasks that you only do because you're expected to do them. This is when you're dating seriously. When people used to ask me, are you dating anyone serious? I'd always say, no, the girls I date are pretty lighthearted. Next, you begin to test each other. Well, if he loves me, he'll do what I want. Or if she really likes me, she'll be glad to go with me, even if I'm calling half an hour before the party. You try to find out, do you enjoy being with me as much as I enjoy being with you? Another one, you feel you can't communicate on the same level. The things that are exciting or interesting to you aren't interesting to your partner. You don't feel fulfilled when you talk or share experiences. Some couples, when they get to this point, substitute affection for their lack of emotional intimacy. They know how to kiss, but they don't know how to talk to each other. Another one, you feel lonely and think about other people. You find yourself daydreaming about other things you could be doing or other people you could go out with. Even though the two of you are together, you feel lonely. Another, you feel like a low priority. Their level of commitment to the relationship differs from yours. You feel like you're an interruption to the other person, like you're not important. Marriage occupies a lower spot in their planner and on their list of priorities. Here's a story about a man named Johnny who was busy as a student at the Y. He's an RM with a good future, but still a single guy. Okay, that's enough. Let me tell you about a time when I got dumped. I had taken this girl out to dinner a few times and on a few other casual dates, and I thought something good might develop. But on the way home from our 7th or 8th date, she became really serious and asked if she could talk to me inside for a minute. Uh-oh, I thought, here it comes. We entered her apartment, sat on the couch, and I listened as she struggled to put her thoughts into words. I could tell it was hard for her. She looked uncomfortable. I think I kind of enjoyed that. And although she was telling me she didn't like me that way, I was appreciative and respected her for being willing to be honest and for telling me face to face that she wanted to be just friends. We talked for another minute or two, smiled and laughed a little, and I left. The breakup lunch, I had a hunch. That's the way I survived the breakup lunch. We can edit that part later if you want. Was it fun? Not at all. In fact, it hurt a little bit. There I was, interrupted once again mid-cycle with an armful of soapy laundry. However, I would much rather have it happen that way than by one of the other common but less direct methods, having her roommates repeatedly tell me she wasn't home, or by having her tell me she was busy each time I called, or having her tell me who I would look good with. I got that one a few times. Or apparently the thought that we might look good together never occurred to her. Or some other honesty-avoiding, hint-dropping, pain-prolonging strategy. Sometimes we know we should break something off, but we're too scared. We might even say, but I don't want to hurt this person. Well, young single adults, here's one of the hard realities of dating and courting. Sometimes as we continue in a dead-end relationship, we think the choice is between hurting someone or not hurting someone. It may be that the only choice you're left with is whether it hurts someone a little or hurts someone a lot. And the longer you prolong a relationship that isn't going to work, the greater the hurt will be. So Elder Hafen's counsel, while it may sound harsh at first not to date someone you know you shouldn't marry, is actually based on kindness. Next, be careful with expressions of affection. Remember, a kiss is a commitment. Some young adults may view expressions of affection as harmless fun. They may even believe that kissing is okay as some sort of recreation. But these expressions of affection are powerful and sacred and communicate a high level of commitment, and that's why we must be careful. Elder Bruce C. Haven counseled, quote, always be emotionally honest in the expression of affection. Sometimes you are not as careful as you might be about when, how, and to whom you express your feelings of affection. When any of you, men or women, are given entrance to the heart of a trusting young friend, you stand on holy ground. In such a place, you must be honest with yourself and with your friend about love and the expression of its symbols. It's the end of the quote from Elder Hafen. Some young men, I've heard, may get caught up in the conquest mentality when it comes to affection. And it's not hard to see where they could have learned this. If you've ever seen a group of guys on a sitcom, you'll notice that when one of them comes home from a date, they all want to know what happened in terms of physical affection. They don't ask things like, well, what's she like? Well, what did you talk about? Or did you like her? Unfortunately, much of modern media has turned dating into a contest and kissing into points on a scorecard. The problem is these expressions of affection, as Elder Hafen said, are closely connected to our feelings. And it's unkind and insensitive to treat expressions of affection so lightly. President Thomas S. Monson warned, men, take care not to make women weep, for God counts their tears. It's always fun to see all the girls, write that one down. That's good. Quote that one later. Any young adult who is paying attention has heard many talks on the law of chastity. We've heard about it in seminary, we've read about it in For the Strength of Youth, and we've heard apostles and prophets speak powerfully on the subject in General Conference. One indicator about the spirituality of the person you are dating is their respect for the law of chastity and their conduct concerning expressions of affection. Their attitude before marriage gives you at least an idea of what their attitude will be after marriage. Elder Hugh W. Pinnock taught, quote, men and women who do not have a wholesome respect for regulations during the dating process will often continue to break the rules after the word yes at the altar is spoken. That's the end of the quote. We have been asked by our leaders to be careful with expressions of affection, not because they are bad, but because they are good. In fact, the only word that seems to describe them properly is sacred. When a relationship becomes too physical, it becomes harder to tell whether you care about the person because of who they are or just because you've developed emotional attachments by expressing affection. One good way to tell if things have become too physical is to agree not to even touch each other for a week or two. See if you just really enjoy each other's company, or if you're making the mistake of substituting physical intimacy for a lack of emotional intimacy. Brother Gawain Wells has written, a couple's physical attraction to one another may mask an inability to communicate. Some couples may know how to kiss, but they don't know how to talk to each other. For them, the physical aspect of their relationship is something they fall back on to avoid developing caring and communication. That's the end of the quote from Brother Wells. It feels wonderful to give someone a hug, to feel close to someone physically, but these feelings are very powerful and can lead to much pain if not handled carefully. So I suggest that it's much better to be very conservative when it comes to physical affection for many reasons. First, the Lord has asked us many times and in many ways to bridle our passions. Second, when you're careful about not sharing too much affection, you're more able to think clearly about the relationship and make better decisions concerning its future. Third, if you do break up, the pain and the embarrassment will be a lot less if you are conservative in your expressions of affection. Remember also that it's a small world, especially in the church. The chances are very good that you will see this person again, maybe even in future church assignments. And at those times, you don't want to have to feel embarrassment or regret in their presence. Kissing and other expressions of affection send powerful messages that others believe and act on. So just make sure your actions are within the guidelines outlined in For the Strength of Youth, and also make sure your actions match your words. Otherwise, it's dishonest and harmful. 2,000 years ago, someone else's actions didn't match their words either. Listen to the stinging rebuke. Judas, betrayest thou the Son of Man with a kiss? Judas used a symbol of affection as a tool of betrayal. And our actions should not betray our true intentions either. So what do you do when you get home from a date? You sleep peacefully because you are honest and true to yourself and your date. And then you can wake up the next morning, see your own reflection with a clear conscience. Elder Russell M. Nelson taught, the first morning's glance in the mirror cannot reflect joy if there is any recollection of misdeeds the night before. The surest step toward joy in the morning is virtue in the evening. That's the end of the quote from Elder Nelson. Sometimes we continue to date someone who has a lot of problems. We may think to ourselves, I can help this person. And while this is a noble motive, we must remember that we are preparing to make the most important decision we'll ever make with eternal consequences. Elder Mark E. Peterson taught, quote, enough difficulties develop in the best of marriages to convince us that we should take as few problems to the altar as we can, close quote. The fact is, the same people who walk into the sealing room walk out again when the ceremony is over. And if someone had certain problems when they were engaged, chances are they will have those same problems when they're married. Elder Hugh W. Pinnock taught, quote, you must ever realize that you had better marry the person who has the built-in characteristics you desire, because marriage is not a place where you will be able to change another or to fit him or her into the mold of what you want. Because the marriage decision is so important, every young adult should be striving to live the gospel, keep their covenants, and thus be worthy of the constant companionship of the Spirit. Elder Bruce C. Haven also counseled, quote, in general, remember that you will need, as much as you will need it for any purpose, the guidance of the Holy Ghost in seeking an eternal companion and in building relationships toward that end. The key to spiritual guidance, still quoting Elder Hafen, is not how long you pray, or what steps of prayer you follow, or what words you say. The key to spiritual guidance is found in one word, worthiness. That's the end of the quote from Elder Hafen. Whether we marry in this life or not, keeping our covenants is the best assurance of a life of peace, happiness, and joy. Some young single adults have questioned, well, why did we get different answers when we prayed about this? This is another dilemma that comes from a righteous desire to follow the Spirit. Perhaps a couple who are having a lot of problems are confused because they thought they received an answer to prayer concerning their relationship. I've appreciated this explanation again from Brother Gawain Wells. Quote, some couples may argue that they have received a spiritual confirmation of their relationship. Why then didn't it work out? It's possible, of course, that you wanted so badly for it to work out that you misinterpreted spiritual feelings and, in essence, put words in God's mouth. Interrupt the quote for a second. I like that, a good feeling. Sometimes we attach the words to what we think that meant, but it might have just been a good feeling. Back to Brother Wells. But there's another possibility. People change. Though the dating relationship was right at one time, it isn't anymore. The spiritual confirmation could have been an assurance of the relationship's capacity, its possibility, its potential, but it wasn't a guarantee of ultimate fruit. It's the end of the quote from Brother Wells. Here's another one. Perhaps one person felt they received a yes answer and the other a no answer. Sometimes one person may feel that they can rely on the other person's spirituality and should follow whatever answer they receive. Elder Dallin H. Oaks taught, I have heard of cases where a young man told a young woman she should marry him because he had a revelation that she was to be his eternal companion. If this is a true revelation, it will be confirmed directly to the woman if she seeks to know. In the meantime, she is under no obligation to heed it. The man can receive revelation to guide his own actions, but he cannot properly receive revelation to direct hers. She is outside his stewardship. That's the end of the quote from Elder Oaks. Elder Gerald N. Lund, speaking at a church educational system fireside for young adults, made a similar statement, quote, when I was teaching in the Institutes of Religion in Southern California, there was hardly a semester that went by that I didn't have an experience like this. One of my students would come to me, usually a girl, and report that the boys she had been dating, sometimes seriously, sometimes casually, had received a revelation that they were to marry. I won't ask for a show of hands, says Elder Lund, about how many have faced a similar declaration. But I will. No. Yeah. But I know from my experience, continues Elder Lund, it would be more than a few of you. The interesting thing to me was that often the girl felt intimidated by such a declaration, feeling that she needed to accept the Lord's will, even though she found the prospect somewhat distasteful. In some cases, it was downright distasteful. Some were even a little shocked, Elder Lund continues, when I boldly explained that unless they received an independent confirmation from the Lord, they should feel no pressure to accept the boy's request. A young woman might say, well, since he got an answer and because he has the priesthood, I guess that's the Lord's will, and I want to follow the Lord's will. One of the most sobering stories I've heard on this subject was given in a talk by Elder Bruce C. Hafen. Quote, some years ago, a young couple planning a temple marriage came to my office here at BYU. I was in a student stake presidency, Elder Hafen says, for recommend interviews. At the conclusion of my private interview with the young woman, I asked if she had any questions. She said, well, yes, there's one question. Is it all right to marry someone if you don't love them? That puzzled me more than mildly, since she was planning to be sealed in the temple in just a few days. We talked a little further. She told me the story of their courtship, when after fasting and prayer, she had been unable to feel that she should marry this young man. He told her that he felt that the proposed marriage had the Lord's approval. And then she told me she was a recent convert to the church and had great respect for the priesthood. So she said, he and I both decided that because he held the priesthood, he had the authority to receive the correct answer to my prayer. And now I'm willing to marry him if that's what I'm supposed to do. But in all honesty, I must admit, I don't love him. Elder Hafen continues, that was a very difficult time for me. But I felt that I should talk to the young man alone, which I did. I tried to explain to him that as I understood the teachings of the church, he had no authority. He had no priesthood authority over this girl, as much as he loved her and in spite of his great intentions and hopes for them. I asked him if he knew her true feelings, and then I suggested that the two of them might want to talk a little further to be sure of themselves. As far as I know, they never did marry. This experience left me wondering how intelligent members of the church could become so confused about the role of priesthood authority. That's the end of the quote from Elder Hafen. Now, this might be a good time to express a little thought. If you really don't want to marry someone, that's probably a good sign that you shouldn't. You might want to jot that down. Okay, what if I get no answer? Sometimes I believe receiving no answer is an answer. In our efforts to do what's right, we might say, I'll do whatever I need to do, just tell me what that is. That's a righteous desire, but it's a little like standing in front of your fireplace and saying, give me heat, then I'll give you wood. You have to do the work before you get the benefit. You'll notice that when Nephi and his brothers were trying to get the brass plates from Laban, their first two attempts failed. As Nephi began his third attempt, he didn't say, Lord, I am not moving until you tell me exactly what to do. Rather, he said, and I was led by the Spirit, not knowing beforehand the things which I should do. This was a real test of faith, and Nephi proceeded without knowing for sure what would happen. Elder Marion G. Romney taught, while the Lord will magnify us in both subtle and dramatic ways, he can only guide our footsteps when we move our feet. That's the end of the quote from President Romney. Perhaps it's more common to receive the absence of a no answer than it is to receive a yes. Elder John H. Groberg taught, quote, in the past, I've tried to figure out whether I should go into business or into teaching or into the arts or whatever. As I had begun to proceed along one path, having more or less gathered what facts I could, I have found that if that decision was wrong or taking me down the wrong path, not necessarily an evil one, but one that was not right for me, without fail, the Lord has always let me know just this emphatically. That is wrong. Do not go that way. That is not for you. On the other hand, Elder Groberg continued, there may have been 2 or 3 ways that I could have gone, any one of which would have been right and would have been in the general area, providing the experience and means whereby I could fulfill the mission that the Lord had in mind for me. Because he knows we need the growth, he generally does not point and say, open that door and go 12 yards in that direction, then turn right and go 2 miles. But if that is wrong, he will let us know. We will feel it for sure. I am positive of that. So rather than saying, I will not move until I have this burning in my heart, let us turn it around and say, I will move unless I feel it is wrong. And if I feel it is wrong, I will not do it. By eliminating all of these wrong courses, very quickly you will find yourself going in the direction that you ought to be going. And then you can receive the assurance, yes, I am going in the right direction. I am doing what my Father in heaven wants me to do because I'm not doing the things that he does not want me to do. And you can know that for sure. That is part of the growth process and part of accomplishing what our Father in heaven has in mind for us. That's the end of the quote from Elder Groberg. The Lord told Oliver Cowdery to study it out in his mind before making a decision. I suppose we have to do our own homework and then take our best shot. And once committed to a course of action, we are more likely to receive the guidance we desire. Brother Joseph Fielding McConkie told of a young woman who had to make a decision in order to receive an answer. Quote, a young woman received a proposal from a fine young man she had been dating. Uncertain in her feelings and unable to identify a clear spiritual direction, she sought counsel with her bishop. He explained that he could not and would not attempt to make that decision for her, but suggested that if she committed herself to a course of action, she would almost immediately find it confirmed or hedged up with feelings of foreboding. She went back to the young man and told him that she would marry him. With that commitment came a feeling as though she had been immersed in a sea of darkness. The engagement lasted 24 hours. She later suggested that she could not conceive a more dramatic or emphatic answer to her prayers, and that she was extremely grateful for it, notwithstanding the temporary embarrassment associated with it. That's the end of the quote from Brother McConkie. I feel confident that the Lord will not leave us alone on this major decision, and that we can expect to be guided even if we don't realize it at the time. I've also learned that when we do our best, the Lord will honor our effort. President Brigham Young taught, quote, if I do not know the will of my Father and what he requires of me in a certain transaction, if I ask him to give me wisdom concerning any requirement in life or in regard to my own course or that of my friends, my family, my children, or those that I preside over, and I get no answer from him, and then do the very best that my judgment will teach me, he is bound to own and honor that transaction, and he will do so to all intents and purposes. Some young adults also wonder if they made agreements to marry someone while in the premortal existence. Some people are now looking for that person they are supposed to marry. The I Have a Question section of the June 1977 Ensign addresses this very topic. Quote, the first presidency in 1971 stated that we have no revealed word to the effect that when we were in the pre-existent state, we chose our parents and our husbands and our wives. President Joseph Fielding Smith wrote, it is possible that in some instances it is true, but it would require too great a stretch of the imagination to believe it to be so in all or even a majority of cases. Certainly the wisest course for any of us to take is to build a relationship on its own merits, rather than on any premortal contracts we suppose have taken place. That's the end of the quote from the I Have a Question section. And I would suggest that those of you who have internet access read the entire article on www.lds.org. Again, that's the June 1977 Ensign in the I Have a Question section. President Boyd K. Packer also taught that we must make our choice in the here and now. Quote, righteous love comes so naturally and so beautifully that it is apparent there is a special providence about it. They were meant for each other, we say. While I am sure some young couples have some special guidance in getting together, I do not believe in predestined love. If you desire the inspiration of the Lord in this crucial decision, you must live the standards of the church, and you must pray constantly for the wisdom to recognize those qualities upon which a successful union may be based. You must do the choosing, rather than to seek for some one and only so-called soulmate, chosen for you by someone else and waiting for you. You are to do the choosing. That's the end of the quote from President Packer. I might also suggest finding and reading a January 1975 New Era article by Elder Bruce R. McConkie called Agency or Inspiration. In it, Elder McConkie said, "How do you choose a wife? I've heard a lot of young people from Brigham Young University and elsewhere say, I've got to get a feeling of inspiration. I've got to get some revelation. I've got to fast and pray and get the Lord to manifest to me whom I should marry." Well, maybe it will be a little shock to you, continued Elder McConkie, but never in my life did I ask the Lord whom I ought to marry. It never occurred to me to ask him. I went out and found the girl I wanted. She suited me. I evaluated and weighed the proposition, and it just seemed 100% to me as though this ought to be. Now, if I'd done things right, if I'd done things perfectly, I'd have done some counseling with the Lord, which I didn't do, but all I did was pray to the Lord and ask for some guidance and direction in connection with the decision that I'd reached. That's the end of the quote from Elder McConkie. For some young adults, marriage happens very quickly and seemingly without much effort. For others, myself included, have a more difficult time. We may wonder if there really is such a thing as falling in love, or if the whole thing is just an invention of Hollywood. Mispronunciation intended. I'm grateful that we have other sources besides pop culture to help us answer the question, what is falling in love? In the movies, it's when the music starts. But what about real life? President David O. McKay once described a conversation he had with his mother. My mother once said that if you meet a girl in whose presence you feel a desire to achieve, who inspires you to do your best and to make the most of yourself, such a young woman is worthy of your love and is awakening love in your heart. I submit that as a true guide. That's the end of the quote from President McKay. President Ezra Taft Benson made a remarkably similar statement. And one good yardstick as to whether a person might be the right one for you is this. In her presence, do you think your noblest thoughts? Do you aspire to your finest deeds? Do you wish you were better than you are? That's the end of the quote from President Benson. If we merge these two statements, we get a list of 6 things which may help us to describe the types of feelings we are looking for. The 6 things would be, you feel a desire to achieve, you feel inspired to do your best, you feel inspired to make the most of yourself, you think your noblest thoughts, you aspire to your finest deeds, you wish you were better than you are. I would like to suggest that those 6 things can be reduced to 2. As you go through the courtship and engagement process yourself, you'll often ponder the question, why do I love this person? And among your lists of reasons, I hope you will have these 2. My fiancé is someone I respect, and my fiancé is someone I admire. Long after your youth and beauty fades, those 2 will still endure. They, I think, are at the core of real love. And someone that you respect and admire will no doubt create a similar response in others, such as your family and friends. And speaking from experience, there is no greater thrill than to discover that your family and friends, whom you admire and respect, also feel respect and admiration for your fiancé. Movies, magazines, and pop culture seem to teach that physical beauty is the most important thing, but actually, beauty is overrated. And this is not to say that you should go out and find the most unattractive person possible. Certainly, you want to be attracted to your spouse. President Ezra Taft Benson listed attractiveness as one of the qualities to look for in a potential mate, but not at the expense of many others. Speaking to single adult men of the church, President Benson said, "Now, brethren, do not expect perfection in your choice of a mate. Do not be so particular that you overlook her most important qualities of having a strong testimony, living the principles of the gospel, loving home, wanting to be a mother in Zion, and supporting you in your priesthood responsibilities. Of course, she should be attractive to you, but do not just date one girl after another for the sole pleasure of dating without seeking the Lord's confirmation in your choice of an eternal companion." That's the end of quote from President Benson. Yes, being attracted is to the one you want to marry is important, but you will also find that someone's appearance changes the more you get to know them. We've all known very attractive or handsome people who have lost some of their appeal when their personality showed their inside to be unkind or cliquish. We've also known average-looking people to become quite attractive when their interaction with others reveals their kindness and goodness. When you really love a person for what's inside, they will remain attractive to you forever. I've been touched by these words of President Gordon B. Hinckley. May I be personal for a moment? I sat at dinner across the table from my wife the other evening. It was 55 years ago that we were married in the Salt Lake Temple. The wondrous aura of young womanhood was upon her. She was beautiful, and I was bewitched. Now, for more than half a century, we have walked together through much of storm as well as sunshine. Today, neither of us stands as tall as we once did. As I looked at her across the table, I noted a few wrinkles in her face and hands, but are they less beautiful than before? No. In fact, they are more so. These wrinkles have a beauty of their own, and inherent in their very presence is something that speaks reassuringly of strength and integrity and a love that runs more deeply and quietly than ever before. That's the end of the quote from President Hinckley. I believe that attractiveness has much more to do with the personality of a person than the appearance. Kind of had to count on that myself. So here I am on television. I have a great face for radio. Once you are a married couple, daily experiencing the ups and downs of life, you will see how little appearance matters to a happy marriage. A happy disposition, on the other hand, will make your spouse more beautiful than ever. So by all means, marry someone you're attracted to. Just make sure the prize on the inside matches the wrapping on the outside. I hope the answer to the next question is obvious, but since it's part of the title of my presentation, we'd better answer it. Why is marriage so important? Why we marry? Well, let me just quote from the Doctrine and Covenants. In the celestial glory, there are 3 heavens or degrees, and in order to obtain the highest, a man must enter into this order of the priesthood, meaning the new and everlasting covenant of marriage. And if he does not, he cannot obtain it. He may enter into the other, but that is the end of his kingdom. He cannot have an increase. That's section 131. Because marriage is so important, a related question might be, but why is marriage so urgent? Why are people always walking up to me and saying, hey, when are you going to get married? When I was a young adult, I wanted to get married. I didn't want it to be too obvious, though, because that just wouldn't be cool. But I had a rather difficult time. Something about looking at my face made young women want to go on a mission or get a passport and get out of the country. And you may not believe me, but I could give you their names. But I'm not that bitter, so we'll continue. I knew why marriage was important, and I also knew that it was urgent. I knew that it was urgent, but why? Here's just a few reasons I thought of. When we marry. Why is marriage urgent? Number 1, there's the possibility of moral transgression, longer exposure to temptation and the desires of the flesh. Number 2, there's important knowledge and growth needed to become more like God that can best be acquired in a family setting as a father, a mother, and a spouse. Number 3, marriage is an ordinance. And in a way, there's a certain urgency that we move along the path and receive the ordinances necessary for us to be able to go to the celestial kingdom. Number 4, the longer one remains single, the less available are potential spouses of similar age. That's the one that used to keep me up at night. Number 5, the biological clock keeps ticking for men and for women. And number 6, it's a better way to live. That last read is my favorite because I know it's true. It's a better way to live. President Spencer W. Kimball taught, while marriage is difficult and discordant and frustrated marriages are common, yet real lasting happiness is possible, and marriage can be more an exultant ecstasy than the human mind can conceive. See the quote from President Kimball. For most young single adults and for most people, life doesn't unfold exactly the way they thought it would. Life will throw us twists and turns that we can't possibly anticipate, and that's what makes our time on earth, with the proper attitude, a wonderful adventure. Elder Bruce C. Hafen taught, your time for marriage may not come until the autumn of your life and then be twice more precious for the waiting. Even if your time should not come in this life, the promises of eternal love are still yours in the Lord's view of time, if only you are faithful. That's the end of the quote from Elder Hafen. The proverb tells us to trust in the Lord with all our hearts and lean not to our own understanding. And part of trusting the Lord with all our hearts is to trust in His timing. Doctrine and Covenants, section 111, verse 11 says, therefore be as wise as serpents and yet without sin, and I will order all things for your good, as fast as ye are able to receive them. They say that breaking up is hard to do. That's a song. It is. Sometimes we wonder why we have to go through such things. We wonder what possible purpose there could be in experiencing such heartache. We may even question our own worth during these times. Orson F. Whitney taught, quote, no pain that we suffer, no trial that we experience is wasted. It ministers to our education, to the development of such qualities as patience, faith, fortitude, and humility. All that we suffer and all that we endure, especially when we endure it patiently, builds up our characters, purifies our hearts, expands our souls, and makes us more tender and charitable, more worthy to be called the children of God. Close quote. It might be helpful to remember that even the Savior himself felt rejection from people he loved and wanted to bless. If you've been through a difficult breakup, it may be helpful to remember these words that I heard from my high councilman's talk in my student ward. He said, "Perhaps the wrong one is the right one to lead you to the best one." I might also suggest reading an excellent article from which I've already quoted in your June 1982 Ensign called "Breaking Up Without Going to Pieces" by Brother Gawain Wells. You can read it on lds.org. Remember also that your desires for marriage and family are righteous desires, and the scriptures teach that the Lord will bless you for your righteous desires. The fact that you desire marriage may be more important than you realize. Listen to this story from President Boyd K. Packer. Some years ago, a president of a student stake asked if I would counsel with a young couple. The stalwart young man and his lovely wife had recently been told with some finality that they would never have children of their own. They were heartbroken as they sobbed out their disappointment. What they wanted most in life, what they had been taught and knew was an obligation and a privilege beyond price, they were now to be denied. Why? I consoled them as best as I could and offered comfort that really was insufficient to quiet the pain they felt. As they were leaving the office, I called them back and said, "You are a very fortunate and very blessed young couple." They were startled, and the young man asked why I would say such a thing as that. Did I not understand what they had told me? Why would I say they were fortunate and blessed when they were to be denied the thing they wanted most, children of their own? I answered, "Because you want them. In the eternal scheme of things, that will be of inestimable and eternal value. The Lord has said he will judge all men according to their works, according to the desires of their hearts." That's the end of that story from President Packer. Clearly, the Lord recognizes your righteous desires. In the meantime, do your best to be happy and enjoy life to the fullest. Elder Marvin J. Ashton, while addressing a single-member fireside, quoted Karen Lynn Davidson, who said, "I have yet to see marriage by itself turn an unhappy person into a happy person. A really happy married person is almost always one who was or could have been happy as a single person." That's the end of the quote. The Lord did not say men and women are that they might have joy, unless, of course, they are single. And I believe that the Lord will expect us to make something of our lives and to serve and bless each other in this world, whether we marry or not. And sitting on your hope chest and being miserable is not a strategy for happiness. Elder John K. Carmack, speaking to singles, to those singles who are in their late 20s, 30s, 40s, or beyond, said, quote, "While temple marriage and family life would be my ultimate goal, whether in this life or beyond, I would be careful not to make it my central focus. Marriage is more likely to come naturally from living life fully than by a direct and pointed campaign to achieve that long-range goal." President Gordon B. Hinckley, in the closing stanza of a poem he wrote for young single adults called "If I Were You, What Would I Do?" said, "If I were you, what would I do if courtship and marriage didn't come through? I'd fret, but I'd say there's no time to stew. Get busy, find something important to do." Life is wonderful, and there are so many important things that you can do to bless the lives of others and make the world better because you were here. So I echo President Hinckley, get busy, find something important to do, and live life to the fullest. Remember, Nephi said, "I will go and do, not I will sit and stew." President Hinckley continued, "There are some who, for reasons unexplainable, do not have the opportunity of marriage. To you, I should like to say a word or two. Don't waste your time and wear out your lives wandering about in the wasteland of self-pity. God has given you talents of one kind or another. God has given you the capacity to serve the needs of others and to bless their lives with your kindness and concern. Reach out to someone in need. There are so very many out there. Add knowledge to knowledge. Refine your mind and skills in a chosen field of discipline. Never in the history of the world have women been afforded such opportunities in the professions, in business, in education, and in all of the honorable vocations of life. Do not feel that because you are single, God has forsaken you. I repeat his promise quoted earlier. Be thou humble, and the Lord thy God shall lead thee by the hand and give thee answer to thy prayers. The world needs you. The church needs you. So very many people and causes need your strength and wisdom and talents. In closing, let's learn another lesson from Liberty Jail. The prophet Joseph Smith taught, "You know, brethren, that a very large ship is benefited very much by a very small helm in the time of a storm by being kept workways with the wind and the waves." This verse should leap off the page for young single adults. Sometimes you may feel like you're in a ship trying to navigate a raging sea. You're harassed by the wind and the waves. The course was laid out for you when you were younger, You were a deacon, then you were a teacher, then you were a priest, then you went on a mission. For young women, you were a beehive, then you were a maid, then you were a laurel, and then kind of opens up. But you wonder now that the course is not laid out how you'll weather the storm. What keeps you safe? The answer is a very small helm. A helm keeps you on course. A helm implies that you have a destination and a purpose in your life. It implies that you know where you're going, you have a reason for being at sea. But without a course, without a destination, without a plan, you just float aimlessly, tossed about by every wind. But as a Latter-day Saint, you know who you are, you know why you're here, you know where you're going. And if you are a young single adult who isn't quite sure what to do next, may I suggest that you keep close contact with your bishop or branch president. Tell him you're eager to get involved and to serve, and also get involved in the Institute program in your area. Our church leaders have encouraged all young adults from ages 18 to 30 to get involved in their local institute, whether they are attending college or not. Surround yourself with good people who are also eager to learn and to live the gospel. Make a decision to always be active in the church, keeping your covenants and anxiously engaged in good causes. This is the helm and the destination and the purpose that will keep you workways with the wind and the waves. As a single, some people believe that with a few carefully worded questions, they can figure out exactly what your problem is. I speak from experience. Even though you've been fasting and praying and stewing and pondering about it for years. So when people approach your piano and sometimes make careless assumptions, be careful. Don't let yourself become bitter. Just remember that you and the Lord know the real truth. So set the matrimony, a duet, piece of music aside, and play what you can play, and keep playing, because silent pianos do not attract crowds. There are many things in life that on the surface don't seem to make sense. I know a single adult woman whom I greatly admire and respect, who told me once that if prayer and fasting and visiting the temple were the only things required for finding a husband, she would have Nephis lined up at her door. Sometimes you can do everything you're supposed to and not receive the desired blessing. Nephi did everything he was supposed to without murmuring and yet received horrible treatment from his brothers. Abinadi died an awful death, although he did everything he was asked. And of course, Jesus Christ lived a perfect life and suffered more than man could suffer. Countless other examples could be offered, but it sufficeth to say, living right does not necessarily mean living easily. I've been impressed by the words of this poem, whose author is unknown to me. My life is but a weaving between my God and me. I do not choose the colors, he worketh steadily. Ofttimes he weaveth sorrow, and I in foolish pride forget he sees the upper, and I the underside. Not till the loom is silent and the shuttles cease to fly will God unroll the canvas and explain the reasons why. The dark threads are as needful in the skillful weaver's hands as the threads of gold and silver in the pattern he has planned. Single or married, what we are all really searching for is peace. Peace is the feeling that we're doing the best we can with what we have. Peace is the feeling that we could face God and that he would know the desires of our hearts. Peace is knowing that one day God will explain the reasons why. To find real peace, we must turn to the Prince of Peace. Jesus taught, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give unto you. Not as the world giveth, give I unto you. Let not your heart be troubled, neither let it be afraid." I've read this verse many times in the past, and I've never thought of it as a commandment until I heard a talk by Elder Jeffrey R. Holland. Speaking of this scripture, he said, "I submit to you that this may be one of the Savior's commandments that is, even in the hearts of otherwise faithful Latter-day Saints, almost universally disobeyed. I am convinced that none of us can appreciate how deeply it wounds the loving heart of the Savior of the world when he finds that his people do not feel confident in his care or secure in his hands or trust in his commandments." That's the end of the quote from Elder Holland. The bottom line, we can trust him. So do what you can do and find peace in the Savior. I am grateful for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I'm grateful for the plan of salvation that teaches us the importance of marriage and family. I'm especially grateful for church leaders, many of whom I have quoted today, who give such excellent counsel and direction. And I pray that the Lord will bless you as you faithfully move forward in your lives. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen.